Hello everyone. Naruto Fix here, back with another amazing What If Naruto fanfic. Which is, what if Naruto became the emotional center of the entire village? Part 1. If you enjoy Naruto stories, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps the journey grow. Now let's head right into today's fanfic. Naruto Uzumaki had always believed strength was something you proved in motion. You ran toward danger. You stood between people and what threatened them. You took the hit so others didn't have to. That belief had shaped his entire life. It had given him purpose when he was ignored, direction when he was angry, and meaning when the world felt unbearably heavy. Naruto learned early that if he could endure more than anyone else, then maybe, just maybe, he would earn a place where he belonged. What he never expected was that, one day, people would stop leaning on his strength and start leaning on his heart. Peace changed the village slowly. Not with celebration, not with relief, but with quiet. Missions became routine. Threats faded into memory. The urgency that once drove every decision dissolved into daily life. People slept without fear. Children played without being rushed indoors. Conversations lasted longer, because no one was listening for alarms anymore. And in that quiet, emotions surfaced. Grief that had never been processed. Fear that had been postponed. Loneliness that had been ignored. The village had survived war. Now it had to survive itself. Naruto noticed the change before he understood it. At first, it felt like coincidence. Someone asked him to stay a little longer after a meeting. Someone else stopped him on the street just to talk. A shinobi lingered after training, not asking for advice, just presence. Naruto didn't question it. He had spent his whole life wishing people would want him around. Why would he question it now? People started coming to Naruto without realizing why. They didn't come for solutions. They didn't come for orders. They didn't even always come for comfort. They came because when Naruto listened, they felt lighter. Naruto didn't interrupt. He didn't judge. He didn't rush people toward answers. He just stayed. And staying, it turned out, was powerful. It began with small things. A Jonin who couldn't sleep after losing a teammate during the war found himself talking to Naruto late one night. Naruto didn't say anything profound. He didn't offer philosophy or strategy. He just listened, nodded, and admitted that he still had nights like that too. The Jonin left feeling understood. Word spread quietly. A civilian who had lost her home years ago during an attack found herself crying in front of Naruto in the marketplace. She apologized repeatedly, embarrassed. Naruto handed her a cloth and waited. He didn't tell her to be strong. He didn't tell her things would be fine. He told her it made sense to still hurt. She hadn't heard that in years. Soon, Naruto's presence became something people sought instinctively. Not as Hokage, not as a hero, but as a safe place. And Naruto, who had once begged the world to see him, didn't notice when the world quietly reorganized itself around him. Sakura noticed first. She had always been perceptive, always able to read the undercurrents of people's emotions. She saw how conversations shifted when Naruto arrived. How tension softened. How people unconsciously positioned themselves closer to him. She felt it herself. When things overwhelmed her, she found herself seeking Naruto out. Not because she needed answers, but because being near him grounded her. That realization unsettled her. Because she wasn't used to relying on someone emotionally. Hinata noticed it too, but for different reasons. She had loved Naruto quietly for years, admired his resilience, his optimism, his refusal to give up on people. Seeing the village drawn to him made sense to her. What startled her was how natural it felt. Naruto wasn't trying to be anyone's anchor. He just was. And that made her wonder how many people felt what she felt, just in different forms. Shikamaru understood it in his own way. He watched how Naruto absorbed emotions without being overwhelmed by them. How he didn't deflect discomfort with jokes anymore, but allowed silence to exist when it needed to. He's not just carrying expectations anymore, Shikamaru muttered once. He's carrying people. That worried him. Because no one could carry that much forever. Naruto himself felt something changing inside him. He was tired in ways training didn't fix. Not physically. Emotionally. He went home some nights feeling heavier than when he'd left, like he had taken pieces of everyone else's feelings with him without meaning to. He lay awake wondering why he felt so full, and so empty, at the same time. He told himself it was nothing. Naruto had always endured. But endurance was different from absorption. And Naruto was absorbing everything. People didn't realize they were leaning on him more each day. They didn't see how often Naruto postponed his own feelings to make space for others. How he swallowed his exhaustion behind a smile. How he told himself that if he could handle it, then he should. Because that was who Naruto had always been. The one who took on what others couldn't. Hinata began to worry. She noticed how Naruto rarely talked about himself anymore. How his laughter, though genuine, didn't always reach his eyes. How he listened more than he spoke. She wanted to ask him if he was okay. She didn't. Because everyone else was already asking him that in different ways. Sakura felt the same concern. She caught herself thinking, who does Naruto go to? The question stayed with her. Because the answer wasn't obvious. Naruto stood one evening on the Hokage monument, staring at the village lights below. The sight filled him with warmth, and something heavier. The village felt closer to him than ever. And somehow, that closeness felt isolating. I wanted to be connected, he whispered. I didn't know it would feel like this. Naruto had become the emotional center of the village. Not by choice, not by ambition, but because he had learned how to hold pain without turning away from it. And the village, finally at peace, had more pain than it knew what to do with. Naruto Uzumaki did not realize when the balance shifted. There was no announcement, no sudden moment where everyone collectively decided to lean on him. It happened the way erosion happens. Slow, unnoticed, inevitable. One conversation led to another. One quiet moment turned into routine. And soon, Naruto's presence became something people subconsciously sought when they felt lost. He didn't correct it, because he didn't know how. Naruto had always believed that listening was easy. You stayed quiet. You paid attention. You cared. But he was learning that listening deeply meant letting other people's emotions settle inside you. It meant carrying their fears, their regrets, the grief, even when they left feeling lighter. Naruto noticed that after certain conversations, his chest felt tight. After others, he felt restless, unable to sleep. He began dreaming of things that weren't his, faces he barely knew, memories he had never lived. He told himself it was normal. Heroes carried weight. The village adjusted itself around Naruto's availability. People stopped going to the memorial stone alone. They waited until Naruto was nearby. Shinobi delayed difficult conversations until they could talk to him afterward. Even children gravitated toward him, sensing safety without knowing why. Naruto smiled for them. Always. Hinata watched this transformation with a mixture of admiration and fear. She had always seen Naruto as someone who carried pain bravely. But this was different. This pain wasn't sharp or immediate. It was constant, cumulative. It settled into him quietly, layer by layer. She noticed how Naruto rarely declined anyone's request to talk. How he stayed longer than he should. How he listened even when exhaustion pulled at his posture. Hinata recognized that pattern. She had lived it herself. Sakura's concern deepened. She saw the signs clearly. Emotional fatigue, delayed reactions, subtle detachment. Naruto was still present, still kind, still warm. But Sakura could tell he was beginning to hollow himself out to make room for others. It reminded her of field medics who refused rest until they collapsed. She wanted to stop him. She didn't know how. Shikamaru finally addressed it, indirectly. One evening, he sat beside Naruto on a rooftop, watching the village below. They didn't speak for a while. Troublesome thing about peace, Shikamaru said eventually. Gives people time to feel things they avoided. Naruto nodded. Yeah. Guess that's good, right? Shikamaru studied him carefully. Depends who they give those feelings to. Naruto laughed softly, but it didn't sound amused. Naruto started avoiding his own emotions. Not consciously. Instinctively. Whenever he felt frustration, he pushed it aside. Whenever sadness surfaced, he reminded himself that others had it worse. Whenever loneliness crept in, he told himself he was surrounded by people. He confused being needed with being connected. And the difference mattered. The village, meanwhile, grew more dependent. People didn't just talk to Naruto anymore, they waited for him to reassure them. His approval mattered more. His reactions shaped how people felt about their own choices. Naruto hadn't asked for that power. But he had it. Hinata noticed Naruto losing his quiet moments. He used to stand alone sometimes, gazing at the sky, letting his thoughts wander. Now, there was always someone approaching him, calling his name, asking if he had a moment. He always did. And that worried her. Sakura finally voiced her concern. Carefully. You don't have to do everything, she said one afternoon after Naruto stayed late listening to a group of shinobi talk thrug. Post-war trauma. Naruto smiled. I don't mind. That's not what I asked, Sakura replied gently. Naruto paused. He didn't have an answer. That night, Naruto lay awake, staring at the ceiling. For the first time, he wondered something unsettling. If I stop being available, who am I to them? The thought scared him more than any enemy ever had. Naruto realized something painful. As a child, he had been ignored. Now, he was indispensable. Both extremes were dangerous. He stood again at the edge of the village, feeling the pull of thousands of lives intertwined with his. The village felt closer than ever, and yet, he felt strangely alone within it. I wanted to belong, he whispered. I didn't know belonging could feel this heavy. Naruto Uzumaki began to feel the weight in moments that should have been ordinary. A simple walk through the village no longer felt like movement. It felt like interruption. Someone always stopped him. Someone always needed a moment. Someone always had something heavy sitting in their chest that they didn't know how to carry alone. Naruto listened. He always listened. But listening had started to feel less like choice and more like gravity. He noticed how often people said his name before speaking, as if saying it anchored them. How they watched his face closely, waiting for reassurance before deciding how to feel. Naruto had once wanted that attention more than anything. Now it frightened him, because it meant his reactions mattered more than he intended. Naruto realized he had become a reference point. If Naruto nodded, people felt confident. If Naruto smiled, they relaxed. If Naruto hesitated, doubt spread quietly. He hadn't meant to lead emotionally. But leadership had found him anyway. Hinata noticed the toll it was taking. Naruto still laughed. Still joked. Still encouraged others. But the laughter ended faster now. The jokes felt softer. And when Naruto was alone, when he thought no one was watching, his shoulders sagged in a way they never used to. Hinata saw herself in that posture. It was the posture of someone holding too much without complaint. She wanted to reach out. To tell him that he didn't have to be strong all the time. That he didn't have to be everyone's anchor. But she hesitated. Because Naruto had always been strongest when people believed in him. And she feared that questioning his role might make him feel like he was failing. Sakura's worry sharpened into urgency. She recognized emotional burnout when she saw it. She had lived it in hospitals and war zones. Naruto was showing the same signs. Deflection, exhaustion masked as optimism, self-neglect disguised as responsibility. She tried again. You don't always have to be the one, she said one evening. Naruto smiled automatically. If I can help, why wouldn't I? Sakura didn't smile back. Naruto began avoiding stillness. When he was busy, he didn't have to think. When he was surrounded by people, he didn't have to feel his own emptiness. So he filled his schedule with everything. Meetings, training, patrols, conversations that stretched long past when they should have ended. Silence scared him now. Because silence was where his own feelings waited. The village continued leaning. Not maliciously. Not consciously. They leaned because Naruto never said no. Because he never set limits. Because he had been taught, by loneliness, by war, by survival, that being needed was the same as being loved. One night, Naruto stood alone on the Hokage monument again. The village spread beneath him like a living thing. He felt its emotions humming. Relief, sorrow, hope, fear, all of it brushing against him. For the first time, he felt something crack. Not loudly, quietly. A realization. If I fall, what happens to everyone else? The thought terrified him. Naruto had become the emotional center of the village. But no one had asked if the center could hold. Naruto Uzumaki began to notice the cracks not in moments of pain, but in moments of relief. When someone finished talking to him, truly talking, the kind that left their voice hoarse and their eyes lighter, they would thank him, smile, and walk away steadier than before. Naruto would watch them go, feeling glad he could help. Then the weight would settle. Not immediately. Not dramatically. It came later, when he was alone. Naruto realized that he never felt lighter after these conversations. He felt emptier. That frightened him. Because Naruto had always believed that helping others filled him up. That being useful gave him purpose. Now, usefulness felt like something that drained him slowly, drop by drop, without ever announcing itself. He tried to talk about it once. Not openly. Not honestly. Just a comment, tossed casually into the air. Funny how people come to me more now, he said to Shikamaru one afternoon. Shikamaru looked at him for a long moment before answering. Yeah, funny. Naruto laughed, expecting something else. Shikamaru didn't laugh back. That silence stayed with Naruto. Naruto started recognizing patterns. People didn't just come to him when they were hurting. They came when they were unsure. When they needed validation. When they wanted permission to feel okay. Or not okay. Naruto gave it freely. Too freely. He didn't realize that by doing so, he was slowly training the village to look outward for emotional resolution instead of inward. He didn't realize that he had become the shortcut. Hinata watched Naruto's exhaustion deepen. She noticed how he rarely initiated conversations about himself anymore. How he deflected questions with humor. How his eyes drifted when people spoke, as if he were listening with half his strength and saving the rest for the next person who would need him. She recognized the signs because she had lived them. The signs of someone who believed their own needs were less important. Hinata tried to reach him gently. You don't rest much anymore, she said one evening, careful not to accuse. Naruto smiled. I'm fine. Hinata nodded. But she didn't believe him. Sakura stopped hinting. She began watching. She saw how Naruto's reactions lagged by half a second now. How he sometimes looked surprised when people laughed at his jokes, as if he'd forgotten he was the one who told them. She noticed how he forgot small things, appointments, meals, conversations he'd already had. Naruto was running on emotional instinct. And instinct could burn out. Naruto started dreaming again. Not nightmares. Fragments. Voices speaking all at once. Faces he couldn't quite see. Emotions blending together until he couldn't tell which were his. He woke up tired, heart racing, hands clenched. He didn't tell anyone. He didn't want to add his weight to anyone else's. That was when Naruto realized the cruel irony. He had become the place people went so they wouldn't feel alone. And in doing so, he had isolated himself completely. One evening, Naruto tried something new. Someone approached him, hesitant, heavy-eyed, clearly carrying something painful. Naruto opened his mouth to say, "Of course, what's wrong?" And stopped. For just a second. "I don't have a lot of time," he said instead, carefully. "But I can listen for a bit." The person nodded, disappointed but understanding. Naruto listened. He left early, and the guilt nearly crushed him. He realized something then. Setting boundaries hurt, but so did having none. And Naruto didn't know which pain was worse. The village continued to function. People continued to heal. But Naruto began to feel something shift beneath the surface. A subtle imbalance. Like a structure leaning too far in one direction. Naruto stood on the Hokage monument again, looking down at the village he loved more than anything. "I wanted to be someone people could rely on," he whispered. He pressed a hand to his chest. "I didn't realize I'd forget how to rely on anyone myself." Naruto Uzumaki began to understand exhaustion in a way he never had before. This exhaustion did not come from long missions or endless training. It didn't burn in his muscles or slow his reflexes. It sat quietly in his chest, heavy and unmoving, like something that refused to be shaken loose. He could sleep for hours and still wake up tired. Because what drained him was not effort. It was presence. Naruto realized he was always on. Always listening. Always reacting. Always adjusting himself to the emotional temperature of whoever stood in front of him. He smiled when people needed reassurance. He softened his voice when people felt fragile. He hid his impatience, his confusion, his frustration, because someone else's pain always felt more urgent. Naruto told himself this was what leadership looked like. But leadership, he was learning, came with distance. And Naruto had none. The village no longer approached him as a shinobi or a hero. They approached him as a constant. Something reliable. Something unchanging. Something that would always be there. And Naruto had never known how to say, "I can't be that today." Hinata felt the shift most clearly when Naruto stopped asking questions. He used to check in on her, genuinely curious, quietly thoughtful. Now, he responded more than he initiated. He listened deeply, but rarely shared. Hinata noticed how conversations ended with Naruto carrying the silence afterward, eyes unfocused, smile fading the moment he was alone. She saw herself in that. And it frightened her. Sakura finally confronted the reality she had been avoiding. Naruto was burning out. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But steadily. She had seen it before in medics who refused rest. In leaders who carried everyone else's fear until it hollowed them out. Naruto was doing the same thing. Except no one had assigned him this role. He had stepped into it because no one else had. Naruto began losing track of his own emotions. When he felt irritated, he dismissed it. When he felt lonely, he ignored it. When he felt overwhelmed, he told himself it wasn't as bad as what others were facing. Over time, those emotions didn't disappear. They piled up. One evening, Naruto tried to remember the last time someone had listened to him without expectation. Not as Hokage. Not as a symbol. Not as reassurance. Just as Naruto. The answer didn't come. That realization hit harder than any enemy ever had. Naruto stood in the middle of the training grounds long after sunset, staring at the worn earth beneath his feet. This place had once been where he burned off frustration, where anger and determination had somewhere to go. Now, even this place felt heavy. "I don't know where to put this," he whispered, pressing a hand to his chest. There was no one to hear him. The village slept peacefully. That was the cruelest part. Naruto had helped create this peace. He had held the line, taken the hits, carried the hatred, endured the loneliness. Now the village rested, emotionally, physically, because they believed Naruto would hold things together. And Naruto was starting to crack quietly beneath that belief. Hinata made a decision she had been circling for days. She sought Naruto out, not because she needed comfort, but because he did. She found him sitting alone, staring into the distance. "You don't have to be okay all the time," she said softly. Naruto smiled out of habit. "I'm fine." Hinata didn't smile back. "I don't think you are." Naruto froze. Just for a moment. And in that moment, the role he had been wearing slipped. Naruto Uzumaki did not answer Hinata immediately. Her words did not feel like an accusation. They did not feel like pity. They felt like recognition. And recognition, Naruto realized, was far more dangerous than concern. "I'm okay," he said again, softer this time, as if lowering his voice might make the statement more believable. Hinata didn't argue. She didn't push. She simply sat beside him, close enough to be present but not demanding. The silence between them felt different from the silences Naruto had grown used to. This silence didn't ask him to carry it. It shared the weight. Naruto noticed his shoulders relax slightly, almost against his will. That frightened him, because it meant he had been tense for far longer than he realized. Naruto had spent weeks, months, absorbing the village's emotional turbulence without question. He had mistaken endurance for balance, usefulness for connection. Now, sitting beside Hinata, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Relief. Small, fragile, but real. "You don't have to say anything," Hinata said quietly. "I just noticed." Naruto swallowed. Noticed. No one else had said that word. People had thanked him, relied on him, trusted him, but no one had noticed what it was costing him. Naruto stared ahead, eyes unfocused. "I don't know how it happened," he admitted finally. "One day people just started coming to me." Hinata nodded. "Because you listen." Naruto let out a quiet, humorless laugh. "I always listened." "Yes," she said. "But now they stay." That truth landed heavier than Naruto expected. He had always been there. But before, people left to continue fighting, surviving, coping. Now they stayed, emotionally tethered, unconsciously anchored to him. Naruto felt a twist of guilt. Had he allowed this? Or had he needed it too much to stop it? After Hinata left, Naruto didn't feel lighter. But he felt clearer. Clarity hurt, because it forced him to look at the truth without the buffer of denial. Naruto had become something dangerous. Not a tyrant, not a manipulator, but a single point of emotional gravity in a system that needed distribution, not concentration. The village was healing, but all that healing flowed through him. And nothing flowed back. The next day, Naruto noticed it everywhere. A shinobi hesitated before making a decision, then glanced at Naruto as if seeking permission. A civilian smiled only after Naruto reassured them. A child stopped crying the moment Naruto crouched down beside them. It wasn't admiration. It was dependence. Naruto's chest tightened. He remembered what Jiraiya once told him. "A leader who carries everything alone eventually breaks." Quote. Naruto had believed that strength meant ignoring that warning. Now he understood it meant preparing for it. Sakura noticed the shift too. Naruto wasn't just tired anymore. He was thinking. Thinking was dangerous. Because Naruto didn't think like others. When he reached conclusions, he acted on them with conviction that shook foundations. Sakura found him sitting alone after a meeting, staring at his hands. "You okay?" she asked. Naruto looked up. "Do you think people can lean too much on one person?" Sakura didn't answer immediately. Yes, she said finally. I've seen it happen. Naruto nodded slowly. That night, Naruto dreamed of standing in the village square, holding everyone upright while the ground beneath him cracked. No one noticed the fractures because they were too busy leaning. He woke up gasping. Naruto began testing something small. When people came to him, he listened, but he didn't always reassure immediately. Sometimes he asked questions instead. Sometimes he redirected them to someone else. Sometimes he said, I think you already know the answer. The reactions unsettled him. Some people accepted it gratefully. Some looked confused. Some looked disappointed. That last reaction cut deeper than he expected. Naruto realized something painful. Some people didn't come to him to heal. They came to him to avoid facing themselves. And he had allowed it. Hinata watched Naruto begin to pull back, carefully, intentionally, and worried that he might isolate himself completely. She recognized the pattern. Naruto had always swung between extremes. Ignored, needed, never balanced. She feared he might disappear emotionally in an attempt to correct things. Sakura confronted him again. You don't have to fix this alone, she said firmly. Naruto looked tired. That's the problem. I already did. The words carried no bitterness. Only fact. Naruto finally allowed himself to ask the question he had been avoiding. Who takes care of the one everyone leans on? The answer terrified him. No one. Because Naruto had never allowed anyone to. He had learned, long ago, that needing others led to disappointment. So he had learned to be self-sufficient, emotionally independent, endlessly giving. But that coping mechanism, once necessary, had become harmful in peace. The village didn't need a pillar. It needed a network. Naruto stood again on the Hokage monument, the wind tugging at his jacket. The village lights below felt warm, but distant. I can't keep doing this the same way, he said quietly. For the first time, the thought didn't feel like failure. It felt like responsibility. Naruto realized that being the emotional center was not sustainable. But being emotionally present without being emotionally consumed might be. That meant boundaries. And Naruto had never learned how to build those. He began thinking about what change might look like. Not dramatic withdrawal. Not sudden coldness. But teaching the village, slowly, that healing didn't need to pass through him alone. It meant encouraging connection between people, not always to him. It meant trusting others to hold each other, just as they had once trusted him to hold them. Hinata felt hope stir cautiously. For the first time, Naruto wasn't just enduring. He was reflecting. And reflection meant growth. Naruto Uzumaki did something he had avoided for a long time. He slowed down, on purpose. Not because he was forced to. Not because someone ordered him to. But because he finally understood that if he didn't, something inside him would quietly collapse. The village didn't notice immediately. People still greeted him the same way. Still smiled when they saw him. Still approached him with the same openness they always had. But Naruto began responding differently. Not colder, not distant, just measured. When someone came to him with uncertainty, he didn't immediately reassure them. When someone sought validation, he asked what they thought first. When someone unloaded pain, he listened, but didn't always absorb it. Each choice felt wrong at first. Selfish. Naruto hated that feeling. The guilt was immediate. The moment he redirected someone, suggesting they talk to a teammate, a friend, a leader, he felt as if he were abandoning them. The instinct to pull everything back onto his shoulders screamed inside him. You can handle it. You've always handled it. But another thought finally pushed back. At what cost? Hinata noticed the change clearly now. Naruto wasn't disappearing. He wasn't isolating himself. But he wasn't letting himself be used as an emotional endpoint anymore. Conversations didn't always end with relief anymore. Sometimes they ended with reflection. She saw how hard that was for him. And she respected it. Sakura noticed something else. Naruto was starting to talk again. Not a lot. Not dramatically. But when she asked how he was, he didn't immediately deflect. Sometimes he paused. Sometimes he said, "I'm tired." Sometimes he admitted, "I don't really know." Those small admissions mattered. They meant Naruto was letting someone see him, not just rely on him. The village reacted in subtle ways. Some people adjusted naturally. They found strength elsewhere. They leaned on each other. They learned that Naruto wasn't the only place emotions could go. Others struggled. They hesitated. They seemed unsettled. They missed the certainty Naruto's presence used to give them. That unsettled Naruto too. But he reminded himself of the truth he was learning. Comfort that depends on one person is fragile. Naruto began to feel something unfamiliar as days passed. Not relief. Space. A small amount at first. Enough to breathe. Enough to notice his own emotions again. He realized he had been living in reaction mode for so long that he had forgotten what his own internal state felt like. The return of it was overwhelming. He felt frustration he hadn't acknowledged. Loneliness he had buried. Sadness he had postponed for years. It all came back at once. One night, Naruto sat alone, not because he had to, but because he chose to. The silence felt heavy, but it also felt honest. For the first time in a long while, he let himself feel without filtering it through responsibility. And it hurt. But it was his. Naruto understood something critical in that moment. Being the emotional center of the village had not only drained him, it had delayed his own healing. He had helped everyone else process the war, the loss, the fear. He had never processed his own. Hinata sensed that shift too. She saw Naruto more introspective, more grounded, less scattered. He wasn't lighter, but he was more present with himself. She realized that this change was not a step back. It was a step inward. Naruto Uzumaki discovered that reclaiming himself was harder than giving himself away. When he began to create space, small, careful spaces, he felt emotions he hadn't touched in years rise up without warning. They didn't arrive neatly. They came tangled, heavy, and unresolved. Memories from the war surfaced alongside moments from his childhood. Faces of people he had saved blended with faces of people he had lost. He realized he had never truly processed any of it. He had survived. But surviving was not the same as healing. The village responded unevenly. Some people adjusted quickly. They began leaning on teammates again, opening conversations with family members they had avoided, or simply sitting with their own thoughts instead of rushing toward Naruto for reassurance. Those changes were subtle but meaningful, and Naruto noticed them with quiet relief. Others struggled. There were moments when someone would approach him, begin to speak, then stop when Naruto gently redirected them. The disappointment in their eyes cut deeply. Naruto felt it like a personal failure, even though he knew, intellectually, that it was necessary. Every boundary felt like a betrayal. And yet, every boundary gave him just enough strength to keep going. Hinata continued to watch him closely. She saw the effort behind every measured response, the restraint behind every pause. Naruto was still kind, just not endlessly available. Hinata recognized the courage that took. Setting limits had never been easy for him. He had spent his entire life fearing that if he stopped giving, people would stop staying. She wanted to tell him that wasn't true. But she knew Naruto needed to reach that belief himself. Sakura noticed something else emerging beneath Naruto's exhaustion. Anger. Not explosive, not directed, but present. A quiet frustration at how much he had carried without question. At how easily people had leaned on him without asking what it cost. Sakura understood that anger. She had felt it herself after the war, buried beneath responsibility and duty. She knew it wasn't dangerous. It was overdue. Naruto's dreams shifted. The voices faded. The crowd dissolved. Instead, he dreamed of standing alone in open space. Not isolated, but unburdened. The dreams left him unsettled, but not panicked. When he woke, he felt raw, exposed, and strangely grounded. For the first time, his mind was not filled with other people's emotions. Only his own. One afternoon, Naruto declined a request outright. No explanation. No apology. Just, "I can't right now." The words tasted wrong in his mouth, but they held. The person nodded, surprised but understanding, and walked away. Naruto stood there long after, heart racing, waiting for the familiar guilt to crush him. It didn't. Not completely. He realized something then. Guilt had been his guide for too long. It had taught him to give, to endure, to carry, but it had never taught him when to stop. Naruto understood now that guilt was not the same as compassion. And compassion without limits became self-destruction. The village began to feel different to him. Less like something he had to hold together. More like something he could stand within. People still cared. Still trusted him. Still looked to him as a source of warmth and stability. But the pressure was no longer constant. It pulsed instead of pressing. Naruto could breathe between the waves. Hinata approached him one evening as the sun dipped low. "You look steadier," she said quietly. Naruto considered the word. "Maybe," he replied. "I think I'm just finally standing on my own feet again." Quote. Hinata smiled. Not softly, not shyly, but with genuine relief. Naruto understood something essential in that moment. Being the emotional center of the village did not mean absorbing everything. It meant connecting without disappearing. And learning that distinction was the hardest battle he had ever fought. Naruto Uzumaki began to understand that balance was not something you found once and kept forever. It had to be maintained. Every day. There were mornings when he woke up feeling lighter, as if the weight he had carried for so long had finally shifted. On those days, Naruto moved through the village with a quiet steadiness. He still greeted people, still listened when it mattered, still offered warmth, but he no longer let every emotion pass straight through him and settle in his chest. Then there were other days. Days when old instincts resurfaced. When someone looked at him with desperation in their eyes and Naruto felt the familiar pull. The urge to say "I've got you," to absorb everything, to push his own limits just a little further for the sake of someone else's peace. Those were the hardest days. Because now he knew what that path led to. Naruto noticed how deeply ingrained his role had become. Even when he set boundaries, people still oriented themselves around him unconsciously. They still checked his reactions. Still softened when he smiled. Still hesitated when he seemed distant. He hadn't just become a listener. He had become a reference point for emotional stability. And that didn't disappear overnight. Sakura spoke to him about it one evening after a long day. "You don't have to undo everything at once," she said, leaning against the railing beside him. "People don't change patterns quickly. Neither do you." Quote. Naruto nodded slowly. "I know. I just don't want to swing to the other extreme." Sakura studied him. "You won't. You're thinking about it too much for that." Naruto let out a quiet laugh. "That's what worries me." Quote. Naruto was learning something uncomfortable about growth. It wasn't clean. It wasn't heroic. And it definitely wasn't linear. Some days he felt proud of the space he had reclaimed. Other days he felt selfish for taking it. Sometimes both feelings existed at once, tangled together in ways he didn't know how to separate. But for the first time, he didn't push those feelings away. He sat with them. Hinata noticed Naruto's presence changing again, not into distance, but into intent. When he listened now, he did so fully, without trying to fix everything. When he spoke, His words carried thought instead of instinct. She saw how hard that was for him. She also saw how necessary it was. Naruto had always been brave on battlefields. Now he was being brave with himself. The village began to respond, slowly and unevenly. Some people found new ways to cope. Others struggled and occasionally stumbled back toward Naruto out of habit. When that happened, Naruto gently redirected them again, not with coldness, but with trust. "I think you can handle this," he would say. And sometimes, that was all they needed. Naruto started feeling moments of quiet joy again. Small ones. Eating without rushing. Training without distraction. Laughing without immediately checking how others reacted. These moments didn't erase the weight entirely, but they reminded him of who he was beneath it. One night, Naruto sat alone and allowed himself to think about the future. Not as a leader, not as a protector, but as a person. He realized something that surprised him. He didn't want to stop being someone people trusted emotionally. He just didn't want to be the only place those emotions went. That distinction mattered. Naruto understood now that becoming the emotional center of the village had not been a mistake. It had been a phase. A necessary one. The village had needed somewhere safe to release years of suppressed emotion. Naruto had provided that safety when no one else knew how. But now, the village was strong enough to redistribute that weight. And Naruto was strong enough to let them. Naruto Uzumaki was beginning to understand that balance was not a destination. It was a discipline. Something you practice daily, imperfectly, with awareness and restraint. Some days, he managed it well. Other days, old habits clawed their way back to the surface, demanding he carry more than he should. What surprised him most was how quiet the struggle was. There was no dramatic breaking point. No collapse. No moment where everything spilled out at once. Instead, there was a constant internal negotiation. How much to give, when to step back, where to draw lines without turning them into walls. Naruto had fought enemies that tried to destroy him. This was a battle against a version of himself that believed he had value only when he was useful. The village continued to heal, but Naruto could now see the unevenness of that healing more clearly. Some people had grown stronger through connection. They talked to each other more. They leaned on teammates, families, friends. They learned to sit with discomfort instead of immediately searching for Naruto's reassurance. Others remained stuck. They lingered near him, watched his expressions, waited for his approval before trusting their own decisions. Naruto could feel their dependence like a subtle tug at his chest. He reminded himself again and again. This isn't cruelty. It's habit. And habits took time to change. Naruto began to notice how much of his own identity had been shaped by emotional availability. As a child, he had learned that being loud got attention. As a shinobi, he had learned that being strong earned respect. As a hero, he had learned that being reliable created trust. Now, as peace settled, reliability had turned into emotional permanence. Naruto had become the place where people deposited feelings they didn't know how to carry. And for a long time, he had welcomed it, because it made him feel irreplaceable. That realization stung. One evening, Naruto caught himself agreeing to stay longer after a meeting, even though his head ached and his body felt heavy. He heard his own voice say, "Yeah, I can stay," before his mind could object. He stopped mid-sentence. Actually, he corrected, surprising even himself, "I need to head out." The room fell silent for a brief moment. Not angry. Not disappointed. Just surprised. Naruto felt his chest tighten. He nodded once and left before he could second-guess himself. Outside, the night air hit his face, cool and grounding. His heart raced. Not from fear, but from unfamiliarity. He had chosen himself. And the world hadn't ended. That realization stayed with him. Naruto began testing small acts of self-respect. Leaving when he was tired. Saying no without explanation. Choosing solitude without guilt. Each act felt wrong at first, like breaking an unspoken rule. But slowly, the guilt dulled. The panic eased. In its place came something steadier. Ownership. Hinata noticed Naruto's posture changing. He stood straighter. Not with tension, but with grounding. His eyes were clearer. His smiles, though less frequent, felt more genuine. When he listened, he did so without absorbing everything. Hinata felt relief bloom quietly in her chest. Naruto was no longer disappearing into others. He was returning to himself. Sakura watched the shift with professional concern and personal relief. She recognized emotional regulation when she saw it. Naruto wasn't shutting down. He wasn't isolating. He was modulating. Learning when to engage deeply and when to step back. It was growth. Hard-won and overdue. She felt something loosen in her chest. Naruto began having conversations that felt different. When people spoke to him now, he asked questions instead of giving reassurance immediately. He challenged assumptions gently. He encouraged reflection rather than resolution. Some people resisted. Others surprised themselves. Naruto learned something important in those moments. People were more capable than he had given them credit for. And maybe, so was he. At night, Naruto began letting himself feel again. Not just others' emotions. His own. The grief he had postponed. The anger he had suppressed. The loneliness he had normalized. He didn't push them away anymore. He didn't drown them out with responsibility. He let them surface, one at a time, raw and unfiltered. It hurt, but it was honest. Naruto realized something profound during one of those quiet nights. He had spent so long being strong for others that he had never learned how to be gentle with himself. This was that lesson. And it was harder than any training he had ever endured. The village began to change subtly in response. Not because Naruto demanded it. Because Naruto modeled it. When he set boundaries, others learned they could too. When he admitted exhaustion, others felt permitted to rest. When he stepped back, others stepped forward. The emotional load began redistributing naturally. Slowly. Imperfectly. But it was happening. Naruto stood one evening at the edge of the village, watching people move through their lives. He felt connected, but not consumed. Present, but not responsible for every feeling in the air. For the first time since peace began, he felt like part of the village rather than its foundation. That mattered. He understood now that becoming the emotional center of the village had been necessary. For a time. The village had needed a place to unload years of suppressed pain. Naruto had been strong enough to hold it. But no center was meant to stay fixed forever. True healing meant movement, flow, shared weight. Naruto exhaled slowly, feeling grounded in his own body again. I don't have to disappear to protect others, he said quietly. And I don't have to carry everything to matter. The words settled into him like truth. Naruto Uzumaki finally stopped measuring his worth by how much he could carry. The realization did not arrive like a revelation or a dramatic turning point. It arrived quietly, through repetition, through exhaustion, through the slow understanding that strength without limits was not strength at all. It was erosion. He stood in the village at dusk, watching people move through their lives without looking for him first. Conversations continued without pausing when he passed. Decisions were made without waiting for his reaction. Laughter rose and fell on its own. The village still trusted him. But it no longer depended on him to breathe. And that felt right. Naruto understood now that becoming the emotional center had never been a failure. It had been a phase, an answer to a time when the village needed a place to release years of suppressed pain. He had been strong enough to hold it when no one else could. But strength was never meant to be static. It was meant to evolve. He thought of Hinata, who had seen him when he was breaking and stayed without asking him to perform. He thought of Sakura, who had challenged him when endurance turned into self-neglect. He thought of everyone who had leaned on him, and everyone who was now learning to stand again. Naruto realized something essential. Support was not meant to flow in one direction. Healing was not meant to pass through one heart. That night, Naruto allowed himself rest without guilt. Not as a reward, not as permission, but as a right. He slept deeply, not because the village was quiet, but because he finally was. Naruto Uzumaki did not step away from his people. He stepped among them. No longer the center holding everything together, but one part of a village strong enough to hold itself. Thank you.